So I think what we'll do today is I'll just give everybody a brief overview of acceleration and what we do, and also kind of the fundamental reason that we exist. And then after that, we'll talk about how to build a pitch deck, and we'll also go into the details of me showing you one of the pretty relevant examples that I picked, which is one of our Bahraini startup companies called FACEKI. And then after we've gone through all of that, I'll be open for questions about anything. It can be about the pitch, it can be about venture capital, it can be about how do you come up with good ideas towards startup, anything that you can think of, I'm happy to answer. So basically, I'm the managing director of Flat6Labs Bahrain. We're in multiple locations across the region. We have locations in Cairo, in Lebanon, in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Jordan, and Tunisia. So we're definitely the largest network of accelerators in the Middle East and North Africa right now. And overall, we've got a portfolio of over 320 startups. And in Bahrain, we are also pretty big. Bahrain alone, we have 50 startups in our portfolio so far. And that means that we've invested in 50 startups so far. So, we are sector agnostic. So we go into every vertical that there is, whether it's to do with health tech or e-commerce or prop tech, or, pretty much anything under the sun that we think is innovative and has a unique approach to business, pretty much. So, to briefly explain an accelerator and what the objective of an accelerator is, get a lot of different businesses that call themselves accelerators, but there's quite a lot of differentiation between different accelerators. Some will focus on different areas. Some might be very specific to only focusing on hardware, or others will only focus on artificial intelligence. Some, they just do the acceleration and they don't actually invest in the startup. Others, they're actually like an investor. So they're like a venture capital company that has an acceleration program to support their investments. So we're the latter. What we do is we invest in our companies, and then we support them through the acceleration program. And the fundamental difference between ones that invest in their startups and ones that don't is that it means we have a continuing relationship with all our startups, and that will continue for 7 to 10 years. Whereas the others, they'll sort of do the acceleration, and once you're done with the acceleration program, you won't actually probably be interacting with them after that. So to explain the reason that acceleration exists, it's pretty simple. So in this field of startup, the guys that lead it have to be the ones that believe in the vision and came up with the idea. It's a lot of the businesses are disruptive and they're not traditional models. And because of that, it means that it's something that's not easy for people usually to replicate. And it's also not something that's easy to get financed by traditional methods such as banks, for example. And that's where venture capital comes in. So venture capital is essentially, venture means risk, right? So it's taking risk with investment. And the idea that behind it is that, with that, there's a lot of risk, there's a lot of failure, but there will also be huge success with certain businesses, and that's where they get their return on investment, is on, the 1 out of 10 that does great is the one that actually returns the investment on all 10, basically. So the main thing behind acceleration is to be able to, although people might have a great vision and be a great potential entrepreneur, a lot of the times they have 3 massive barriers, right? And those barriers are access to capital, to be able to finance and start the company, the ability to get mentorship in specific fields. Nobody's an expert in everything, and it really helps to have world-class experts mentoring you, whether it's in marketing or whether it's finance, and some of which you've seen. This is exactly what the incubator is doing over at University of Bahrain. And so then the third thing is access to a network. And this is where our strength really comes in. It's that, in the MENA region, you'll find that our market is large as a whole, but it's very small when you look at how it's fragmented into each country. And in each country, You've got different regulations, different kinds of licensing, a lot of red tape to get through. And so essentially scaling here across the MENA region is very different than if you were to be scaling in EU or in the USA, where everything's sort of unified, and once you're licensed, you can pretty much scale across the entire market. So in that sense, it helps that we have teams like the team that you've met from Flat6 Bahrain in all those other countries that I mentioned earlier, and offices in all those countries, where basically it really speeds up the process of us being able to launch companies into different markets, because we have people on the ground who are experts that know exactly how to get the incorporation done as quick as possible. And they also know how to set up your business development meetings and make sure that you meet all the relevant people, instead of having to figure it out for yourself, which can take, easily 9 months to a year if you're new to that market. So that sort of encapsulates the idea of what acceleration is, and specifically how we work as Flat6Labs. And now what I'll go into is basically the art of pitching. So a lot of the times, everything comes down to the pitch, because that's how you spark the interest of the investor to have further conversations, and then to potentially get a secured investment. So, typically you've got 3 different types of pitches. You've got an elevator pitch, which is usually around 60 seconds. And this is really good if you bump into people at a networking event, or it's literally described as elevator pitch, because the idea is that if you got on an elevator and you met the right person in that elevator, that you would be able to give them a good idea of what your business is within the 60 seconds. And by the time you get to your floor, you've sparked an interest in that. The other one is an investor pitch, which is not narrated. It's usually, it has a lot of caption, a lot of script in the actual pitch deck, and it's self-explanatory. So that's something you would use when you're sending it off to multiple investors, and you're not going to be able to be there to explain to them. And then the third one, which is the one we're going on, and the probably I'd say the most important one, because this is the one that you're going to have to deliver when you actually do meet people in person, is your presentation pitch deck. And so that one is usually, you're going to find that it doesn't have as much captions in it. It's very orientated down to key bullet points. And what it does is it's just there to support your narration. So basically you'll be pitching your business, and the slides in the background are just there to kind of be a visual support to what you're saying. And why I say this is because a lot of people get confused. You don't want there to be too much caption on the script, because basically you don't want to distract them from what you're saying. So if you have a slide full of text and you're trying to narrate something to them, they're going to also be trying to read that slide at the same time, and they might actually get distracted and not absorb all the key points that you're trying to tell them in person at the time. So to start off with, here we've got in front of you the order of how a pitch is usually done. And so you've got your opening slide, which is the first slide that it's very basic. It just includes your logo, the name, and any kind of slogan you have. And that's it pretty much. And then what you do is you go into your next slide, which is the problem slide. You always want to start off with being able to clearly identify the problem that your product or service solves, so that they've already kind of begun to get an interest, right? Like, so if they understand what the issue is, they'll understand why your product and service is probably a relevant thing. So, after you've clearly defined that, and there's 2 ways that people usually do that. They'll either describe a problem by just simply naming key pain points that they're addressing, or what they'll do is they'll kind of tell it from the perspective of a made-up persona. So they might say, this is Ahmed, and Ahmed in his everyday life experiences this issue, and then they'll jump into their solution and how it solves that issue. So that's kind of summarizes how you usually do a problem slide. And then after that, you jump into the solution, where you'll explain to them This is how we as a product or service are solving the issues that we just earlier identified. And so at that point, your whole value proposition has become very clear as a product and service. And probably I'd say the main part is done as far as showing that you have something of value. But then what you need to do is you need to start educating the investor, right? Like, so for example, someone might be a professional investor, but they might not be an expert in your market. And you as the person who's asking them to invest in you, you should be the expert, right? So you want to make sure that you reflect this and you make them also educated on the market so that they feel more comfortable with the idea of potentially investing in you. And the way you do that is that you have a market size slide. And what that is essentially is you identifying the size of the addressable market, which is usually summarized in a financial value. So you might say, for example, we're launching a healthcare app, and it's going to be aimed specifically to diabetics. And there's about 50 million diabetics in the Middle East and North African region. And at the amount we're charging, we would see that market as being worth around $500 million per year, right? So if you were to do that, you've given them an idea of the overall, the whole market that you're targeting and the financial value of that market. And then usually once you've done that, you'll tell them that, okay, but initially we won't be aiming for Middle East and North Africa. We're going to go into looking at the GCC only, or we're going to start off with just Bahrain. And that's the size of this market compared to MENA, which is where we end up planning to go. And we plan to target, say, 5% of that overall. And so then you've kind of made it clear that they understand that there's money to be made, and they understand that you know your market and the size of the market. After you've explained the value of the market, you want to show them how you're going to get the money out of that value, right? Like, so your revenue model is where you explain how your business specifically makes money. So typically, you know, a lot of revenue models usually fall in between two kinds of categories. One is usually commission-based, where every transaction that happens on their platform, whether it's a booking platform for tutors or whether it's an e-commerce website, you're entitled to, say, 10% or 20% commission on every transaction. The other revenue model that's pretty common is that you'll find subscription-based revenue models, which is like Netflix, for example, where you're paying, say, $10 a month, and it's a recurring monthly payment. And so these are usually the main two categories that most startup businesses fall in between. Next, you want to show your competition slide. So your competition slide is really important. And this is where I see a lot of people having massive weaknesses. What happens is that you'll find that a lot of people have ideas, and they tend to, you know, it's a very common thing to hear people saying, oh, no one's ever done this before, and I'm the first to think of this idea, and we'll be the first business to do this. And that's almost never the case, right? There's always someone else who's competing, whether it's in your country and maybe you haven't heard of them yet, or if it's in the region, and definitely globally. There's pretty much always someone else doing the exact same thing that you're doing globally. So you want to make sure that you show them that you're aware of who your competition is, you're aware of where they lie in the landscape, the competitive landscape, and that's usually going to be you showing where their focus is and where your focus is, and what advantages you may have over the competition. This is extremely important if you have actually got competition in your local market, because then, you know, if there's a big global player and they're not in the Middle East, then it doesn't really matter, right? Because they're not immediately coming to this market, but it's still good for you to show them, because you can model yourself after them, right? Because they're usually going to be a lot more developed and further ahead than you, but you need to just localize what they're doing to your region. However, if you have proper significant local competition at that time, then what you want to do is you want to show that you know inside out what the competition is doing, and the ways that you think you can sort of capture the market and your advantages over that competition. So then the next part is traction. Traction typically is hard for you to usually reflect if you haven't launched in the market, because traction usually involves metrics. So this could be revenue, numbers of active users, download, and engagement. But then there's other ways you can show traction if you haven't launched. So say, for example, if I was a platform and my platform is focused on being an aggregator platform that lists all the garages in Bahrain that you could take your car to for maintenance. I would be able to say before I've launched that, hey, you know, I've already got 50 garages in Bahrain onboarded on my platform. And that's important traction because it makes you look relevant, right? Like it shows that you already have a marketplace pretty much essentially for your customers to be able to choose from on which garage they would like to go and do the maintenance at. So that's and also you have things like partnerships where you could say that, you know, we've, you know, with another company, if they were to be doing work directly with universities, they could say we've onboarded 6 universities in the past 3 months. So that shows progress and traction. Next, you have milestones. So milestones, traction is showing where you are, what you've kind of accomplished, and then milestones is showing where you're going. And milestones are important because it shows that you're organized and you have a clear vision of what you're aiming to achieve with that company in the next 18 months. And these become your kind of your benchmarks of success, right? Like, so milestones, usually there'll be multiple things. They can be to do with product development, with you saying that, okay, currently our platform's only in English, but we're planning to scale into Saudi at the end of 2021. And at the same time, we're planning to localize our platform into Arabic, right? Like, so this is a product milestone. Then you would have revenue and user milestones where you'd say, like, right now we have 5,000 users onboarded, but by Q2 2022, we're planning to have 500,000 users onboarded and generating $2 million of revenue. So it's good to sort of show it on a roadmap. And you can kind of combine these both, traction and milestone. And it's literally pretty much just a horizontal line that you'll see later, where you can mark significant events, right? And so then usually what's not mentioned here that you want to have right before your team slide is your ask slide. And your ask slide is you essentially telling them that we're looking to raise, say, $200,000 to support us for the next 18 months of growth so that we can focus on investing, say, 30% in recruitment, 50% into product development, and then 20% into marketing. And that's just for you to kind of show your breakdown and make it very clear of how much it is that you're looking to raise. Figuring out that number is tricky, and it all depends on financial modeling, and that's a whole other topic to get into. And that's very important, is to understand how to do your financial models. So then after you've done the ask slide, you shift into the team. And the reason that the team is pretty much your second last slide is because you've now built up everything, right? Like, you've told them your value proposition, you've educated them on the market, they understand how you make money, they know that you have clear goals for where you want to go, and they know how much you want. The only thing they don't know is, why are you the right person for me to invest in, right? Like, because none of this is going to go anywhere unless the team is great, pretty much. So you need to really build up yourself up and give them confidence that there's a relevant team there. And there's multiple ways that people do that. One is you want to have a team that complements each other's skill sets. So for example, maybe one of them is very good at on the business side of management and marketing and operations, but maybe he's not good on the technical side, right? Or finance, right? So the technical side, you know, usually you'll find there's always someone who puts the title of CEO and someone who puts the title of CTO, which is Chief Technology Officer. And that's because you need somebody on that side, especially if it's a tech-heavy product, then you need somebody who's very skilled and experienced, and his only focus is basically developing the product, and his other partner is the guy who's taking care of all the other fundamentals of the business. Or you'll have like a CFO who's there focusing on the financial side of the business, while the other two focus on running the business, right? So that's important, and it's always good to also have relevant experience. And if you have relevant experience in the industry, obviously it makes a big difference. If you don't, which is what I get asked a lot by students, then the way to make yourself look stronger on a slide like this is to basically say that you have an advisory board, right? And on your advisory board, you would have people who are industry experts. So you could have, for example, your professors, or you could have people who are leaders in their industry who have agreed to help you out. Sometimes they'll do it just out of the goodness of their heart. Sometimes they'll do it by being incentivized by you telling them like, oh, I'll give you 2% share in the company or something if you come on to my advisory board. And so the advisory board really gives people confidence that you do have experts at least overlooking and mentoring you in that industry. And that gives them a lot of added security. So that kind of summarizes how you do your team slide. And then at the end, you've got your closing slide, which again is going to really just feature your logo. You want to have your contact details in case people want to get in touch, and you want to have all your social media handles, right? Like for Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, etc. And then you want to use it as your call to action. So you need to think of who's in the audience, why are you presenting this, and what is it that you want? It's not always going to be that you just want people to invest in you. You might want people to try out your platform. You might be looking for more partners to onboard. These are all things you need to make very clear at the last slide. It's your last chance to reach out to the audience and to activate them, right? So, for example, you'll get it's usual that for B2C products, you'll always get people saying like, please download the product, get in touch with me with any feedback. Happy to learn more of your experience, things like that. If it's more B2B, usually you'll have people saying that, if you believe that your business could benefit from our service, we'll be happy to give you a demo. You can just email us at the given details, for example, right? So now that we've gone through all of that, I'll show you the actual example so that it makes sense as we walk along. So here you've got the opening slide. Like we said, he's kept it super simple. He's got his logo, FACEKI, simplicity meets security. This is his slogan. And then he's just put his website over here. So here he's building up the problem, and he does a very good job at it because this isn't a super basic business. This is a cybersecurity solution, but he makes it quite clear for everybody to understand how it works. So he puts here, organizations are still struggling with fraud and account breaches, balancing security and user experience, which often is quite a headache with having hundreds of passwords for different platforms and things of that nature. And then you've got the customer onboarding process, which is now tying into something different, which he brings up later, because there's the idea of fraud and account breaches and login and user experience, but then customer onboarding, it applies to another value proposition, right? So what he says is, the pandemic has pushed organizations to speed up their digitization plans for their service. So he's also showing that like this is getting really relevant now because everybody is digitizing, everything's being done online, right? So over here, he's put the big question for organizations: is the user who signed up for the service really who they claim to be? So he's basically raising questions and doubts into the fact that most authentication services do not work. They're not foolproof. They can be, if they're PIN codes or password based, they can be hacked. People can enter into your account, and really they don't match up to, say, facial recognition or biometric forms of password protection, right? So now he's introducing the solution. So he's like, FACEKI is your digital biometric authentication. It makes logins to accounts as simple as taking a selfie. So then he's sort of identified the core service of what FACEKI does. And now he goes into giving you an idea of how the product works and the actual experience. So when he was talking earlier about the onboarding proposition, this is something huge for, say, people like Gulf Air or Tamkeen, where they have a lot of users and they want to make things fast and simple. Another example of this would be Ela. They really try to focus on making onboarding as quick as possible. And these are the companies that are really going to do great with millennials and Generation Z, because essentially you're going to find that, our generation and the younger generation, time's really important. We don't like things being more tedious than they need to be. And we like to see people adopting technology to make our life and experience easier. And usually we will go for the service that makes our life the easiest, right? We're not going to go for something that's cumbersome, which Ela has proven a really good example of, because still a lot of the banks, their methods of setting up an account leaves a huge barrier for everybody. So over here, he's put save time, save money, and keep the customer happy, right? So there's a live check, cross verification, it gets your ID information, and it creates a user account. It's as simple as just having the picture of your CPR, taking a selfie, good to go at that point. So now that he's explained the solution and how it works, he's talking about the market size over here. So again, he's gone and he's shown the progression. So MENA is the main goal, but they're not going to be there yet, right? They're going to start off with Bahrain. And so here they put that, the Bahrain market is around $21 million annually, but he's talking about the whole market, right? And then GCC is at $810 million, and then MENA is at 8.6 billion as a whole. And this is specific just to cloud biometric authentication. For most of you that wonder what that means, nowadays you have biometric authentication on your phones, and everyone's got facial recognition software. Everyone's got fingerprint recognition on their phone as well. But the difference is that data is stored on the hardware itself. It's stored on your phone. So it's only going to be possible to access things if you have your phone on you, right? Like cloud biometric authentication means that obviously everything is stored on a centralized database. So my fingerprint, for example, if you come into the airport nowadays, you'll find that if you've had your e-gate done, then you can just go straight through there and it will verify you through your fingerprint, and it's set up where it's stored on a cloud, right? So they can start to use this with multiple services, with eGov services, for example. And this does the same thing, but it's with facial recognition. So he's explained the market size, and now he's going into how he makes money. So he's putting here, this is actually based on a subscription, where he's put that there's a monthly subscription to the client, and also he's put that there's a transactional cost per month. So it's a mixture of a subscription-based model and a commission-based model as well. So here he's kind of put where they are. He hasn't actually identified traction, which is fine, because at this point when he did this, they didn't have traction. What he's done is he's focused on their milestones. Now, you get people that they can, this is very simplified. Usually you get people that they'll have more milestones that they list. But for example, over here, he's put that, they're looking at Q1 2021. He was working on partnering with Tamkeen and being able to pilot his software with them as a user-based authentication system. And then he's put the next parts, which is voice recognition, targeting to get 1 million verifications done on the platform. And then usually you would also want to put, maybe 2022 to start going into the rest of the GCC market, for example. Here he's made his asks super clear. He's put $200,000, and he's made it very, you'll see time and time again that there's everything is minimal. And this is really important, right? Like he keeps only the key information so that it's really quick and clear. Even if you maybe missed some of what he was saying during the slide, you'd be able to look at it, and within a couple seconds, you understand what it's saying. It's saying that we're looking to raise $200,000 and we're going to put 50% into product development, 25% into marketing, and 25% into operations. Here he's built on the team. So he's made it clear what their titles and designations are. You know, Hamza himself has put himself as the chief executive officer, and Nabil's the chief marketing officer. Notice they are both put as co-founder, and Dr. Marianne is not. So it makes it clear to you that she's not one of the founding partners. She's actually just a part of the team. You know, they put her as the AI engineer. And the reason that they felt it was really important to list her out of anyone else on this was that because their core function is artificial intelligence, right? Machine learning is the core at how their facial recognition software works, and it is constantly improving. And it's actually a really tough thing to do, to make spoof-proof facial recognition software, because a lot of the solutions that are out there today, they can be tricked by just putting somebody's picture in front of them. So here he's put their experience, and he's also put their qualifications and certifications. So over here, you're looking at a combined experience between the three of close to 50 years, pretty much. So this really builds on the fact that they're quite a strong team, and it's there to sort of give assurance that, you know, they're fully capable of being able to tackle this, because this especially is an extremely difficult market, right? Because they're going to be competing with huge companies. It's very different than if they were to just do something that was just only focusing on the local market and just addresses like a solution that hasn't actually existed yet in Bahrain, for example. So here's their final slide. You can see that they've neatly put their website, their social media handles, and his email and his website. And this is where he would have done his call to action, where he would have usually been asking banks and corporates if they would be interested in piloting his software onto their platform so that he can get traction, pretty much. So that pretty much summarizes everything. There's a couple things that you need to be prepared for. One is, first I'll start off on the things that investors can do wrong, so that, you know, I think that's the important part for them to be ready for, so that they don't get a negative experience and just give up, right? Like, so a lot of investors, you know, on average, they'll know the market and they'll understand, you know, that side of the business better than the founder, especially if it's early stage. But that's not always the rule of thumb, right? So a lot of is down to interpretation, and a big skill that you're going to have as a founder is learning how to onboard different kinds of information and understanding what is constructive and what is probably accurate, and being able to be good at self-reflection and self-criticism, right? Some investors are wrong, right? Like, so sometimes you get investors that they give feedback and they like to act like they're Simon, for example, on America's Got Talent, right? Like, they like to be the negative person in the group and sound critical, like they know everything, and that's not always the case. So you know, you've had a lot of people, they get declined, and they get declined, it's normal, and they get declined in good ways, they get declined in constructive ways, sometimes they get declined in very harsh ways, right, where people might have overstepped their boundaries or even been borderline rude or something of that nature. And the important part is to never take anything personally, like always just take the best out of all the feedback you get, and be kind of good at analyzing how to use that information to improve and move forward. So I'd say that's like one of the number one things. And never lose your composure. Always, you know, if someone else you feel is being unprofessional or things of that nature, you always maintain your composure because you want to show that you're the better person, and that you're a professional as a founder. So that's just like one thing that I think is very important for everybody to keep in mind. The other part is when you approach, you might be super excited and enthusiastic about your business, but always walk before you run. So you get a lot of people who they try and jump 10 steps ahead. And I get startups a lot of the time that are already jumping into trying to approach investors and raise more funding before they even need it, and not focusing on making sure that the product is perfect, that they understand the market perfectly, and that that they're creating a real service. And that happens a lot in this industry, right? In venture capital, there's this mad spending spree. So we see it all the time, and we've seen it a lot more recently in Saudi. You've had Pay Now, Buy Later solution, Series A, over $100 million. That's huge, even if it was in Silicon Valley in America, right? Like, so you always hear people talking about success as if it's related to raising funding, and it doesn't really mean much if you don't have an amazing product or service. So I think the main focus you always want to have is how can you make your product as amazing as possible and your customer service the best it could possibly be, because that's where you'll win either way. At some point, you'll end up doing great, and that's where you get the product speaking for itself, and organic marketing comes out of people having a great experience on your product or your service, right? So I'd say those are the most important things. The other thing is to be realistic, with your valuations. Always look for strategic partners. Don't only look for people that are going to invest cash only. You want somebody that can bring something to the table, whether it's that they complement a skill set that you don't have, or they can give you mentorship in that industry, or maybe they have very powerful connections in that industry that can help advance you with your business development and things of that nature. Be strategic about the investors that you approach. So revenue generation, there's a few really good books on Amazon. I don't actually remember the one off the top of my head for specifically on revenue model and monetization of business models. But in general, when it comes to business models, I'd say a good foundation of knowledge is if you go onto Y Combinator. There's three that have really good resources on their website. One is Y Combinator, which is the world's biggest accelerator, and they've got an amazing foundation for people that are just approaching a startup and just trying to create business. They've got the best speakers in the world are on there, and they cover every single core topic. So I'd say those platforms, Y Combinator and Techstars, are two really good platforms to approach and to look for information that they have on different sessions. And off of that, I think essentially you could get most of the knowledge you need, at least to come in prepared when you go to an accelerator and you try to get funded by an accelerator and do your pitch. Again, a lot of knowledge is out there. It's amazing how often people don't just Google, right? Like that nowadays you've got access to the best speakers also on YouTube when it comes to it, but definitely YouTube is more difficult because you have to sort through and figure out who's legitimate and who isn't legitimate, because you have everybody trying to be an expert on there, right? But definitely, I'd say Y Combinator Techstars is your best platform to get resources from. So basically, Flat6Labs is similar to those websites they're going to go to, which is Y Combinator and Techstars. Where what we'll do is we'll offer funding. Right now, we're looking at adjusting the amount we invest. I'm hoping to increase it, but who knows? Right now it's at 12,000 BD. And what we do is we take 5 to 10% equity in the company, which means effectively you're getting a valuation on your company between 320,000 and 640,000 US dollars. So that would be between I guess 120,000 BD and 240,000 BD as a valuation on your company, which is pretty good if you don't really have any revenue at the time or any customers or clients or anything at the time, right? So we're the first stage. So we're the very first investor usually in companies. And mainly what we do to support that investment is we have a 4-month acceleration program. So it'd be similar to sort of like university, and what we have is experts that will come in and do sessions covering everything to do with product development, to marketing, to financial modeling, and just make sure that you're well equipped and prepared. And we also use our network to help startups that are looking to go abroad, right? Like they might want to. Sometimes we have some startups, for example, we had one in Tunisia, they raised 800,000 US dollars. And then they wanted to scale as quickly as possible into Bahrain and Egypt. And they had a call with me, and they were operational in Bahrain in 3 months. They're called Go My Code. For you that are interested in learning about software development, they're great for that. But yeah, that's just an example of how we support our startup portfolio. I think you've all met Mahmoud as well, and Mahmoud, he helps to support in the maintenance of the portfolio. And what I mean by maintenance is that after the program's done, now we have 50, so it's getting pretty large, and we follow up with all of them. We have calls with them on a monthly basis, and some of the older ones we have calls with them on a quarterly basis, and we just support however we can. We're always available for them to reach out to us, and if they need meetings with investors, or if they want to brainstorm something with us on an idea for their business, we're always happy to do that as well. So we offer a lot on the, I'd say we offer a lot more on the strategic side as an investor than on the capital side. The capital is just so that they can kind of get the product started. Yeah, calculating the market size is always really difficult, especially here in the region. I get asked this like almost all the time, pretty much. And there is no one sure way about going about it. There's some decent statistics on things like Statista, and then there's also, sometimes you'll find some of the government portals do have a census, and they do have data related to your market. It's all about doing your best to gather the data. You have to be really diligent at trying to explore every resource possible to get data. And then off of that data, you'll find that a lot of it comes down to you being sort of solving your own math puzzle in a way. So it's, maybe you'll find that the number of, maybe your target clients are going to be women from the age of 18 to 35. And then you'll find out that, okay, there's 100,000 women in Bahrain between the age of 18 to 35. That's my consumer base. And then you'll want to know, like, okay, is it applicable to all of them? Am I in like a high price end product, or am I something that's universally applicable to all of that market, right? And then if it's universal, then you just look at like, okay, I want to target 20% of that 100,000. I think I could make $10 per person off of that. So 20,000 times 10 equals $200,000 a year as my market size. So that's just to give you an idea of like how you need to use it. It's really simple math. It's just about being creative about how you find the answer of trying to come up with the best market size you can. When you're in markets like the US and the EU, they've already got so much data and so many companies that are in so many segments that you'll usually find very accurate market sizing that you can just pretty much, it's easy. There's no challenge. You just download it and you put it as a citation, right? But over here, you got to be creative. But that's good as well, because it means there's a lot more room. And the reason there's a lot more room for you to create a business here is because it's not saturated, because it's not being fully explored, and that's why there isn't much data, right? So there's an opportunity that comes with that difficulty. So I think lacking financial knowledge is not a complex problem. a lot of the founders I've met are surprisingly bad at like financial modeling and accounting and things of that nature. But it's about the willingness to learn, right? It's about having the motivation and the work ethic to actually sit down. And you know, part of being a founder is you don't get to pick and choose what you want to do. You need to kind of, that means you'll be in uncomfortable scenarios. And it might be, for example, a lot of people, they hate math, right? So when it comes to them going into looking at finance and modeling and everything, they will see it as almost they get anxiety out of it, and they'll make it seem like it's something much tougher than it really is. But if you just sit there and take it step by step, you'll be able to address it. And again, on even on things like accounting and financial modeling, there's a lot of really good courses on whether you go on Udemy or Coursera. I've seen like even specific courses to startups, the way they do their financial modeling. So it's more about just being proactive. You should see it. My personal, because I, along with doing this, I also have my own businesses, right? Like, so my personal philosophy on things is when I see a huge challenge and I see something that looks really difficult and is almost intimidating, and maybe sometimes it's something that no one has addressed or solved yet in the market because it looks like a nightmare to deal with, that's exciting, right? Like that's like the gold mine. That's where you're going to make all the money. So it's, if you look at it in that light, then you're always going to enter it with enthusiasm, because you know if you solve it that you could have a much higher rate of success, right? So problems are always good.